Napa Valley, also known as wine country, brings almost 4 million guests per year. It is known for its over-the-top wine tasting tours, often paired with pretentious small bites such as a stingy plate of charcuterie, ridiculously expensive Michelin-star restaurants, and allowing lavish wine-consuming lifestyles that is inaccessible to the normal middle-class person now. It promotes high cost of living that suggests its inaccessibility to the normal hard-working middle-class citizens of America. Despite of that, the Napa Valley region starts with a humble beginning, as you know that Europeans were the ones that established the vineyards, but Napa Valley wines region on the map. If it wasn't for the European immigrants, we wouldn't have the prestigious Napa Valley we have now. Hold up a second. If you did believe that the Europeans were the ones to credit for the creation of the Napa Valley wine scene, you are sadly mistaken. In fact, the Chinese population helped build vineyards from the ground up and jump-started Napa Valley wines during the 1880s. Did you know that there were Chinatowns up and down the Napa Valley? Main wines are in downtown Napa, St. Helena, and Calistoga. Fast forward a century and a half, how is the demographic here in Napa Valley predominantly rich and entitled white folks? The earliest to record Chinese immigrants is in 1852. There was over 20,000 of them here, but where are they nowadays? Did they just disappear in midair? Well, the Chinese immigrants had no idea what lies ahead of them. What happens when there weren't enough cheap labor to hire? Well, there was a lack of Africans and Native Americans to hire. So, you recruit Chinese to immigrate to the US and trick them into thinking that there's a chance of becoming rich during the gold rush era. These Chinese laborers thought they made the perfect solution to make a living so they can provide for their families back in China. One of the first labor occupations were constructing the railroad up and down of Naka County, which is what the Napa Valley wine train runs on, and when that's finished, they started transitioning into agriculture such as vineyard workers, hop harvest workers, and also quicksilver mining workers. Now imagine you're a vineyard owner or a winemaker in Napa Valley, California, and you want to make a profit off of wine. Now, that requires an abundance of laborers to manage your vineyards, harvest the grapes, and make the wine. Everything is almost expensive, like the high cost of land, capital, transportation, marketing, and of course, large labor requirements. So, who are we going to hire? A white American that is unreliable because they wander off of work whenever there's news of potential gold? Would you choose to hire a Chinese worker that's going to cost $1 an hour, rather than a white American which is going to cost $1.50 plus a housing accommodation? Well, think about it this way. For every 2 Americans that you hire, you can hire 3 more Chinese laborers. So it's a no-brainer, isn't it? Also, white Americans that complains a lot because they don't want to do vineyard work because it considers degrading. Let me explain. Back then, the vineyards aren't as beautiful, looking like a double cordon canopy like we have now when you visit Napa Valley. It used to be scattered on the floor, and it is required to bend over, which is referred to open quote, stoop labor, end quotes. For the Chinese, they are willing to do the work because they don't have the preconceived notion of being a degrading work. They are reliable, extremely loyal, and the fact that they cost so much more less. Now, the Chinese actually helped dug a lot of the tunnels and caves in the winery that we've seen in Napa Valley. For example, Schramsberg's caves is actually hand dug by the Chinese. They already have a lot of experience setting up dynamites to blow up a hole in the tunnel to make a wine cave by constructing the railroad. Now that the Chinese have helped you grow the vineyards and making successful wine, you have attracted a lot of tourism into Napa Valley. Yet, the first thing the tourist sees coming into wine country is the nasty hot mess of a Chinatown. you have second-handedly promoted growing hate on the Chinese, aka cheap laborers, for the Californians with a few reasons. First, locals were concerned that the existence of foreign dirty Chinese residents would ruin the beautiful Napa Valley's image. They would conspire negatively that the wine consumers would think that your wines is made out of allegedly disease-infested hands and therefore pollute all the wine products. So, they started spreading fake news that the Chinese stomp on grapes with their disgusting feet and disease-infested hands, which there were no evidence to found to support that accusation. Plus, it drives the locals crazy that they have their own community, laundromat stores, Chinese merchants were both successful throughout the valley. If I say that the Chinese experience discrimination, you wouldn't be surprised. But should you be empathetic to your hard-working cheap laborers that were never treated equally to begin with? They look nothing like you, don't speak your language, and is lying on the bottom of the social rank at all times. No, why would you? If all the people hated them, including your friends, neighbors, government officials, church groups, if you speak up for them, that would be uncool. As long as there are always enough vineyard cheap laborers, why would you care? This allowed incidents of discrimination to happen, such as a vineyard manager, he killed Ayon, a vineyard worker, because he was confronted for not paying their wages. He shot him, ran away, and was never prosecuted. Furthermore, the newspaper downplayed any type of Asian to Asian crimes, but exaggerated any Asian on white cases. Another example is when Talbert, a random white person crossing town, out of nowhere stabbed Yeg and killed him because he couldn't provide him a match, and later in court was let free despite a murder weapon matching his own, plus 14 Chinese witnesses to testify, which were easily dismissed. Overall, because he was white, he was pardoned for his homicide. So, now it is the right time to get rid of them. What is the most civilized way to get rid of the Chinese before resorting into something physical? First, they dish out the legitimacy of the law so it can be done and nice and clean. The country puts a stop on restricting more Chinese immigrants to come overseas. In comes the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. At the state level of California Constitution, to prevent Chinese people from owning any land and prohibiting them to no longer having the right to work at California. Now, as a vineyard owner, you can't allow them to tamper your viticultural business. You deny all the fake allegations and fight back hard and overturn the anti-Chinese article in the Constitution for pursuing this case in the Supreme Court. Now, what would the locals do when they can't evict the Chinese out of the valley with the usage of law? Well, it is time to form like-minded groups and find ways to evict the Chinese. Therefore, the locals started forming anti-Chinese leagues in Calistoga, St. Helena, and downtown Napa. McGlashan and Rovlin were the two main guys on the board of the anti-Chinese group at San Jose, spread it to Sacramento, and later Napa Valley. Their main objection is to stop Chinese from immigrating and getting rid of the Chinese by boycotting businesses that employ Chinese. To get to the people throughout Napa Valley to understand the gravity of the situation, they have to manipulate the news and magazines to agree on your evil plan. For example, they asked the St. Helena Star gave approval for the anti-Chinese league. On the contrary, you start worrying that if they did kick out the Chinese, the only available source of labor, then who will take care of the crops? Yet, you came to a realization as a vineyard owner or a wine merchant, you don't want your cheap labor force that takes great care of your crops leaving? Why would you? You spent so much effort on building your kingdom of wineries and vineyards. You're not going to let a bunch of angry, racist townsmen to ruin your cash flow. They are the reason how you make such great profit margins. Although you are open to white laborers such as other European immigrants like the Italians replacing the Chinese, but until then, you want to keep your money flowing. Of course, You won't be part of the anti-Chinese League nor support the Chinese, but you have to be as reserved and not promoting your thoughts to draw unnecessary attention. Most of the people either agreed to the anti-Chinese movement or choose to remain silent, but a man by the name of Leonardo Cotes supported the opposing side. Leonardo Cotes, the owner of the Napa Valley nurseries, wrote an impassioned public letter in the heat of the anti-Chinese movements in the Napa Register, a newsletter, in 1886, asking to represent the other side on the anti-Chinese agitation. The Register printed the letter on the front page to ensure everyone had a chance to read his opinion. His letter started with the standard disclaimers that his side was not necessarily in favor of the Chinese immigration or opposed to the federal Chinese restriction laws. He did assert that as fruit growers, grape growers, and other businessmen, they had a fight to run their business, which require a large capital investment as efficiently as they are able. He did not stress that the Chinese workers were the best low-cost labor option. Rather, he emphasized the unique skills that the Chinese agricultural worker brought to the businesses that made them the best choice, period. Here's some of the highlights that's from the letter. Open quote, "As a result, we have now a large forces of competent, skilled laborers who have been patiently instructed in their businesses for the last 15 or 20 years and longer." With these same citizens there, we use the term advisedly to intimidate or persecute foreigners from any European country who may be here? Then why this unreasonably, unmanly, unjust crusade against the Chinese? Attack your legislators, your government, if you will, for opening the Golden Gate to these people, end quotes. Anti-Chinese leagues are established in downtown Napa, St. Helena, and Calistoga, mainly ran by the main citizens of the city. Out of all three of them, Napa Anti-Chinese League was the most organized and actually coming up with action plans to stop employment of the Chinese, boycott their goods and services, and if there are still Chinese that are still approved to legally stay, they will be converted to be, open quote, well-sanitized white people, end quotes, changing the law to their biggest form of entertainment, which are smoking opium and gamble Chinese game. Napa took a seemingly more structured approach to take them out. They started boycotting the employers that are still employing Chinese workers. This issue was passionately pursued throughout many levels, such as the newsletter covered this issue being against this idea, and for those that didn't support the anti-Chinese League, names are being mentioned in the league meetings so the public would actively boycott local businesses. Yet, after months of debates against the vineyard workers or people that opposed anti-Chinese leagues versus the anti-Chinese League locals, they compromised at boycotting businesses that don't hire Chinese when there's white laborers available, and not required to hire unreliable, drunken white laborers. San Francisco Examiner in November of 1886 reported that the statewide anti-Chinese boycott was, open quote, now in effect dead, end quotes. The pushback of most newspapers in town, the reluctance of many townsmen to turn against local businesses, and the lack of available replacement labor made a boycott unpractical for many. In February of 1886, the simmering tensions between townspeople in St. Helena and Chinatown reached a breaking point. On February 2nd, 200 or 300 anti-coolies marched into Chinatown of St. Helena and demanded the Chinese vacate within 10 days. The Chinese residents locked themselves in their stores and homes and refused to confront the demonstrators. Under tremendous pressure, on February 19, 1886, John Gillem sold the land Chinatown was on to the anti-coolie group in town. This time, you would think that choosing violence and bullying the Chinamen, they will leave after all. In the end, Chinatown is owned by us. Therefore, we are in control, right? If you think that's the case, then you underestimated the Chinese once again. To everyone's surprise, the Chinese understood the law and took them to court, protesting that they had a contract, therefore they can't be kicked out. In the end, they didn't have to pay for 25 years worth of rent because this case was never resolved. Now, you might think the Chinese had took their victory and earned the right to live in Napa Valley. You're once again sadly mistaken. While the Plan B on violently taking on the Chinese had failed again, Plan A, which is evicting the Chinese and not allowing them to come into the United States, had taken a toll on the Chinese. If they are a bunch of single men without family, then how is there a second generation of workers? Therefore, the Chinese demographic had ended up with single men without families and is slowly dying off because of diseases and overwork. By the 1990s, most Chinese are gone, and replacement workers are slowly filling in, such as the Italians slowly arriving in the 1880s and the Japanese arriving in the 1890s. Fast forward to the 21st century, this is why it almost seems like the Chinese were never here before. Till this day, it is predominantly white Americans settling here in Napa Valley, yet there is still barely a bit of trace of Chinese. For example, the cemetery in St. Helena, unfortunately all the graves were wood made and was burned down or disintegrated, so we don't know how many Chinese were buried here. Only a few that are made out of stone are still alive. There is a small sign in downtown Napa of paying respect to the Chinese that were the real vineyard workers, which needs to be recognized. Fortunate enough, this underspoken recognition has started to pick up attention after more than a century. Furthermore, there's going to be more recognition being seen in St. Helena Cemetery, and this is only the start of the celebration of the Chinese in Napa Valley. This story is inspired from the book that John McCormick wrote called Chinese in Napa Valley. For those who are interested in wine history and untold stories, please check out this book. It's available everywhere. And until next time with the Wine Digest, just remember the more you geek, the more the wine speaks. Cheers.